Hello, everybody. Dan D. Federicis of Saratoga Report, and I am here with Assemblywoman Carrie Woerner, the 113th Assembly District Representative for, is it 10 years or 12 years now? I'm sorry, Assemblywoman.
10 years now.
10 years, excellent. Folks, this is sponsored content, and we're going to ask Assemblywoman Woerner. Let me start off. Assemblywoman, how are you doing, and how are things going generally with your campaign?
Good morning, and thank you so much, Dan. It's great to see you again. How are things going with my campaign? Great. You know, we're out knocking doors. We hit our 1,000th door this week, and you know, it is terrific to be out in the neighborhoods and meeting people where they are. I always say that if somebody is willing to spend a few minutes with a surprise visit from me at the door, telling me what's on their mind, what the issues are that matter to them, that it's a real gift. That insight that they're willing to share with me, the trust that they put in me, is really a gift. And so I would say the campaign's going well. We're out working hard. I really feel like that is what voters deserve, is somebody who really wants to work for it. And that's what I'm doing.
I love a candidate, especially an incumbent, that goes door to door and spends the time. When you ran 10 years ago, that was a long time, Republican district. You were on paper the underdog, and you worked so hard that people saw that. And I think that's why, one of the key reasons you were voted in an election you weren't supposed to win, because people appreciated how hard you worked and how hard you were going to work for them.
Thank you, Dan. And I hope that that's what people see, not just during campaign season, but I hope they see that year round, that when the legislature is in session and when the legislature is not in session, that I am engaged and interested and working hard on their behalf.
And you've been a tenacious fighter inside. Not everybody gets a chance to see that. I worked in Albany, as you know, for years, so I did get a chance to see that. Tell me about the last 2 years, your current term that's coming to an end. What is your take on it? What are you proud of? What do you wish you could keep going after, so you can get something across the line that maybe you haven't? Tell me about it.
So the legislature is an interesting place to work. It is filled with people with a lot of different points of view, a lot of different kinds of districts, and it's it can be a bit raucous at times. That is certainly true, and I'm sure you witnessed that during your time in Albany as well. I do have a couple of things this year that I was really proud of, one of which just recently got signed into law, and I'll just tell you a little bit about that. And that's the legislation to allow ambulances to carry blood and blood products and begin a transfusion en route. You may recall, and your listeners may recall, a few years ago, there was a really terrible traumatic accident, a tractor rollover in Easton. And I learned about this at a pancake breakfast in Middle Falls at their firehouse. And the story was this, that the farmer, it was a young woman, her tractor rolled over kind of in the evening, call went out, and the medical director for the EMS services at the time happened to be on call at Albany Med, and she understood the impact or the implication of this kind of an accident and picked up a couple of units of blood and went out to the scene and was able to start a transfusion. Same sort of situation down the southern tier around the same time. In that situation, an air ambulance service from Pennsylvania came to the rescue. And because they came from Pennsylvania, they had the ability to do blood transfusions en route. And they were able to save that farmer's life as well. So those two incidences really brought me to try and investigate what was going on there. And what I learned was that New York was one of 2 states that would not allow ambulances to carry blood and blood products and begin transfusions. So we started with air ambulances. We did that a couple of years ago. And they came to see me the Air Ambulance Association came to see me this past winter. And what they said to me was that since that legislation had been put in place, they did 600 transfusions, saving 200 lives. It was amazing. Wow. So on the strength of that accomplishment and that result, we this year got passed legislation that the governor has just recently signed into law to allow ground ambulances to have the same capability to carry blood and blood products and to begin transfusions en route. This is life-saving, and particularly in our rural communities where accidents can happen far away from a trauma hospital, whether that's a tractor rollover or it's a serious car accident, say in the Adirondacks. This kind of life-saving care is really important. So she signed it into law. It goes into effect on December 17th, and I am just really proud of that accomplishment.
And you should be, for that many lives that were saved and will be saved going forward, with the updates to the bill. Congratulations on that. That's terrific. And you are, there are people don't realize between the Assembly and Senate, there's over 200 legislators in the state, and only a select few can get to the governor and say, "I need this bill. My district needs this bill." And from what I've seen in the working with you years ago, you are one of the ones that can get to the governor and push when you need to.
Absolutely. I mean, being in the majority in the assembly gives me access to parts of the government that I need to have in order to be effective. And so I have, over the course of 10 years, I have built relationships and a skill set that allows me to use my voice to break down an issue and develop solutions, and then persuade people who need to be persuaded that this is a solution that is really critical for our upstate communities, particularly.
Yes, and you touched on that with the Democratic Party in the downstate areas have a different viewpoint than a lot of upstaters, and you in your moderate role, you've been able to push internally. And when I was advocating and lobbying for police officers years ago, I don't know if you recall this, you were able to push back. And I'm not saying you were able to move a mountain and undo things, although I think you have moved mountains a few times before, but you were able to take the worst part of that legislation they proposed, and you were able to moderate it to the point that the police community said, "I can live with that." And that is something you bring to the table that someone else that's either new or not able to get to the key decision makers within the assembly and so forth would not be able to do. Would you like to comment on that?
I think that's definitely true. That I'm in the room where these conversations are held, and I can hear the different points of view and really figure out what is the right way to communicate my concerns about a bill, the issues that I see in its implementation, the challenges that our communities would be faced with if such a piece of legislation were passed. I'll just give you an example. The All Electric Buildings Act. This was something that was very important to the New York City community. Their city council passed an All Electric Buildings Act. And the environmental community feels very strongly that electrification is the best way to reduce greenhouse gases. And there's some merit to that point of view. I'm not disputing that. But I looked at a district where the majority of the housing stock is from the 19th century and early 20th century. And that housing stock, a good percentage of it probably still has original knob and tube wiring. And if we were to pass a piece of legislation that mandated that every building be retrofitted to support all electric utilities, so heat, hot water, stove, everything electric, that would probably require those houses, those 19th century and early 20th century houses, to have all their wiring updated. And the cost of that is substantial. So I was able to, in the room, talk about what that would mean for people who have lived in their homes for many, many years, for whom the value of that home is probably their wealth. So the equity they have in that house is what they have to retire on. And if you force them to be in a position where they have to upgrade their electric service, you've now devalued that asset, and that would be the cost of that would be really tremendous. And so we pushed back on that successfully. And so it is only, that it's only new buildings going forward. But we went even further than that, because once we won the compromise that it would not be all buildings, it would just be new buildings. we then had to talk about the fact that our grid does not have the capacity in all areas to support that level of electric demand. And so in the crafting of that revised legislation, we then pushed to say there has to be a check to verify that there is sufficient electric capacity on the grid to be able to sustain, say, a new development that is in one of our upstate communities. Because I'm very concerned that the independent system operator, the group that is charged with managing our grid, they're already saying that we are looking at winter shortages, and so we have got to be aware and paying attention to what that means in upstate if there's insufficient power to support electrification on the scale that the downstate communities and the environmentalists would like us to see. So we need to make thoughtful policy around energy, and moving to a zero emission economy. But we have to be aware that this is complex stuff, and you can't just pass mandates and hope for the best. You have to be aware of different communities and different types of communities, and what the situation is in terms of existing housing stock, financial capacity, as well as just the infrastructure capacity. So that's an example of how, being in the room, we were able to get changes to what was proposed to make it still move forward. We're still trying to move things forward to a zero emission economy, but doing it in a thoughtful way that is more comprehensively addressing the differences between communities.
That's the essence of who you are. You find that middle ground. You don't throw bombs. You're effective. You get those things done. Whether it's you supported hunters, you've supported reasonable rights and so forth. You're a big supporter of the horse industry, which I'm part of. Some of the trainers. I had a trainer once, and he said, "I'm sorry, I have to host Assemblywoman Woerner. She's coming out to my farm in Stillwater to take a look around." And so I really appreciate how you do all those things. My last question here for you is, in a new term, actually, I might have two questions here, but it could apply to a new term. Women's rights, reproductive rights, that's a big national issue right now, but it filters down to the states in a hurry, doesn't it?
Yes.
What will your advocacy, what will your action be in a new term, as well as anything else in a new term you'd like to bring up that will be your goals?
Certainly New York State, and thank you for this question. So New York State a few years ago passed the Women's Reproductive Health Act, which enshrined in law a woman's right to seek abortion care when she needs it. And that, I think, was an important step forward. But maternal care is something that is challenged in a variety of ways. And one way it's challenged is that we are seeing fewer and fewer physicians practicing obstetrics and gynecology, and so the shrinking of that workforce in the state is challenging, particularly in rural communities. So I think there's a variety of healthcare practice fields that are challenged. Dental is another one I've been working on. But with respect to women's reproductive care, I think we really need to look at the workforce issues and make sure that we are standing up midwifery centers so that we can take advantage of midwives and that skill set. We need to look at maternal mental health. I did a roundtable on this a couple of years ago. And we had pediatricians, we had OBGYNs, we had midwives, we had doulas, all participating in this conversation. And what they all sort of focused on was that the transition into motherhood is often a challenging one from a mental health perspective. And there's not a lot of resources being directed at assessing a new mother's mental health and making sure that she has the care that she needs to manage this transition into motherhood successfully. And some women don't experience those issues, and others do. And so I think that's an area I think we still need to focus on with respect to women's reproductive health.
Well, terrific, terrific. And anything else you wish to talk about in a new term? Some goals you might have.
Yeah, I started working on dental care and access to dental care last year, and we are going to continue working on that. I am going to continue to push for an increase for the redemption centers, because I think our recycling system is starting to collapse as our local redemption centers cannot be sustained. Statewide, we've lost about 20% of the redemption centers in the last year. And this is the backbone of our recycling system, and they need an increase in the handling fee. And I've been fighting for this for a couple of years. I'm going to continue to fight for this. And then the last piece I would just say is that I'm chair of the Assembly's Committee on Small Business, and very concerned about making sure that the existing small businesses, the ones that have, toughed it out, because New York is not an easy place to do business. But the ones that have toughed it out, that we're taking care of making sure that they're not overly burdened by regulations, that we're trying to deal with the additional surcharge and unemployment that they've been paying on for the last few years, to try and strengthen our small business community.
Wow. When you're talking, and I'm taking this in, I'm thinking you are at the ground level fighting for things that are maybe not the sexiest or the highest profile thing, but they're darn important. So good for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Assemblywoman. Thank you for joining me today, and I wish you the best in early November. And hopefully everybody that's eligible to vote gets out and votes, and we have a good process and a good democratic process. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Take care.